Good afternoon and welcome to the Brown University Bookstore and our celebration this week of local authors. Thank you for coming today. We have two Providence poets in our midst, Henry Gould and Stuart. Before we get to that, I'm just going to announce that tomorrow we have a local historian and who has come out with a work of fiction. His name is Richard Kennedy, and he'll be reading tomorrow at 5:30 with several members of the Providence Historical Fiction Writing Group. And that will be tomorrow at 5:30. And on Friday, we have Walter Greatshell, aka W.G. Marshall, who will be reading from his novel Enormity. So that'll close out our week of local authors. Thank you for coming today. And I am proud to introduce local poet, translator of Osip Mandelstam, and flag waver of good Russian poets everywhere, Henry Gould.
Thank you, Bob. Thanks for coming, everybody. I'm a true local Rhode Island poet from Minneapolis. I came here to go to school in 1970, and I got into this college here because on the strength of some imitations of the poet Ted Berrigan, who happens to be from Cranston. So once I got here, I stuck. Anyway, I'm going to start out with some short, old poems. We're having a hot summer, so I thought I'd read a positive summer poem. I think it's positive. This is so short, I think I can remember. Summer was ocean, a deep gift. Incubation of Joshua, solstitial parakeet. And earth was born into heaven, vaulted into heaven on boats of reeds. And this May light in the neighborhoods, where a flowering clematis mantles the porch in curls of shade, is preparation, and joins old bones to climb the coruscating tree. It's another ocean poem. I was born on May 29th, which is Rhode Island Statehood Day, and this poem, in honor of that, the title of this poem is on every license plate in the state of Rhode Island. It's called Ocean State. So every time you see a car in Rhode Island, you can think of my poem. Ocean State. It's kind of a minimalist poem because Rhode Island is kind of a minimalist state. Here the waters gather along the shore. They meet the land breathing in foam and roll the sleepy pebbles and shells back into long sand waves as before. Our moon casting her antique spells. A motionless iris in the whale's eye of the sea, her unspeakable name sinks to the bottom of lonely wells. Her low whispers frame the deserted dome. Her light covers the circus floor, and she lifts with one nocturnal sigh the heaving swells in a silver comb. Here's another little short, simple poem. Doesn't have a title. Vines tremble in the night around the house's wooden doors, rustling in the soft breeze, whispering. Otherwise, not a sound. The high moon stands over the hurrying clouds, motionless in the central dark. The wind tries everywhere for a resting place, vainly turning over leaves. And someone stands there in the shadows, looking out at the dry garden, listening to vine limbs creak in the night air.
I wasn't quick enough to ask you, but the poem you read before this one, can you read that again?
The Ocean State poem? This, I've been in Rhode Island since 1970, but I'm embarrassed to admit, I've only been to Narragansett Pier once the whole time I've been here. But it was a summer night, and the moon was just very big over that pier, and that's where this poem originated. So it's kind of about poetry, and it's about Rhode Island and the ocean.
The last line, hooking with the undertow.
Well, it's a pun, silver comb. It's a comber. Here the waters gather along the shore. They meet the land, breathing in foam, and roll the sleepy pebbles and shells back into long sand waves as before. Our moon, casting her antique spells, a motionless iris in the whale's eye of the sea, her unspeakable name sinks to the bottom of lonely wells. Her low whispers frame the deserted dome. Her light covers the circus floor, and she lifts with one nocturnal sigh the heaving swells in a silver comb. I'll just read one more short old poem. These are all about 30 years old. I like reading old poems that still seem half decent. So. This one's sort of an Orpheus poem. Doesn't have a title. The poet is monotonous, his head resting on her empty sleeve, his voice out of the mine shaft, muttering rumors of precious gems. And stars shine in the black sky, peacefully, released at last from that deep unspoken gloom by his aimless, undying lament. All right, I'm just going to take a quick prose intermission here and read my little statement, which I passed out, so everybody can sit back and relax. I'm going to read some bland prose here. Stuart and I, it's called Cosmic Local Poetry. Stuart and I are here today as part of the bookstore's Local Authors series. And we are local authors, very local. But we're involved in something global, even universal. Poetry is a world endeavor, and we're caught up in that, each in our own way. For my part, I consider myself a sort of Russian from Minneapolis. I've been inspired by a group of poets based in St. Petersburg around 1910 who called themselves Acmeists. Gumilev, Akhmatova, Mandelstam. Mandelstam defined Acmeism as nostalgia for world culture. This is a summary of their sense of poetry as an enterprise in building civilization, and as poetry as a global transhistorical continuum, a tradition stretching back to prehistory. Orpheus, legendary poet of Greece, was priest of Apollo, god of music and medicine, a pairing which suggests that art and song are about healing. For the Greeks, this meant a restoration of health and balance through reason, justice, clarity, wisdom. Orpheus, Apollo's representative, was victim to the frenzy of the cult of Dionysus. The music of the word was sacrificed to the fury of desire amputated from understanding. Poetry appears at the edge of this polarity between mind and sense, intellect and feeling, consciousness, dream. The Acmeists look to their national poet, Pushkin, as embodying this balance at the cusp between Romanticism and Classicism. Mandelstam, here comes Romanticism. I must have kicked the romantic bucket here. Test. Okay, how's that? Mandelstam wrote, classicism is revolution. This is a revolutionary thing happening right here.
Well, you need that. It's a small enough room that you turn it off.
This had, maybe we don't need it, yeah. I don't know. This had a special implication in the context of revolutionary Russia. I think I'm going to just stop there since everybody's, well, I'll keep reading. I hope this isn't too hard, too pedantic. The acmeists were seeking a paradigm in art for the sanity and equilibrium, this nostalgia for world culture, which they recognized in the poetry of the ancients. The Roman Virgil was searching for such a balance in his own day. His Georgics, ostensibly an agricultural manual in verse, was really a meditation on a world which had fallen from a golden age of peace into an iron age of violence and war. The audacity of the poet, as Virgil put it, was to reimagine the golden age by way of an all-embracing pity, compassion for a world oppressed by the rule of brutality, force, and chaos. We're still living, obviously, in the Roman world. This is the fundamental of Apollonian vocation, through imagination and song to bring mankind, us, back to our senses, our intuition of profound justice and harmony. This is the inner meaning of Mandelstam's nostalgia for world culture. He thought of classicism in this sense as the future. It's funny to think of Mandelstam's theories about this because he interviewed Ho Chi Minh back in the 1930s when he was a student in Paris, in France. Mandelstam, along with being a poet, he was kind of an amateur. He was kind of a sometime journalist. And somehow in this interview with Ho Chi Minh, he goes into this oceanic sense that he could feel the waves of the future coming from this man. Sort of a fascinating thing. To my mind, these ideas bring us back to the local as well, for here we are in Providence. We're Providence poets. Providence, to Roger Williams, the city founder, is a theological term bound up with the state motto, which is hope. Providence signifies a cosmic plan, the master architect's or musician's intention to restore everything to its original well-being. Today we're awash in aggressive discourses, a babble of new means and motives. Many today would advance the image of the poet as master communicator, rock star, rapper, comedian, celebrity, and so on. But I think the most basic stance of the poet is as listener. Dante wrote, "Love speaks and I follow, noting down her words like a scribe." The poet listens to a mute song, the whisper of conscience, the music of understanding. And this means we're really all poets here, Stuart and I, and each of you who are also listening. Okay. Sorry for interrupting with a sermon. Maybe some of my poems reflect some of these theoretical ideas, but we'll see. I'm going to read one called, I'll read one called Downtown Sestina. For a while I was writing in these traditional forms. The Sestina is a complicated form with, Sestina means six. It's 6 line stanzas, and there's 6 of them. Each line ends with a certain word, and the same words are repeated at the end of each stanza in this complicated system. So I was trying to sort of mix this artificial Renaissance thing. Anyway, I'll read the poem. It's called Downtown Sestina. Downtown is gleaming, a nest of glass, scant refuge for the homeless and the poor, who trudge along under looming towers, hungry, frazzled, begging small change, and subject to the better sort of people whose eyes reflect the glitter of the city. And so many circles animate the city, captured in the high gloss of the glass. What's taken for the playground of the people erases every doorstep of the poor, in sprawling ellipses of loose change under the stolid mystery of these towers. Under the bright conundrum of these towers, these measuring rods allotting every city, gyroscopes adjusting every change by whirling speculation in the glass, the downward spirals of the ornery poor set stirring turbid shadows in the people, and shuttling promotions of the people, forecast by divination in the towers, who is growing rich and who remaining poor, Start dancing fevers in the chattering city, and snarl the artist in his broken glass, frail craft undone by overmastering change. When fortune is the favored end of change, suburbia the limbo of the people, and tender conscience faints before the glass, rocketing skyward in pretentious towers to serve the sleek imaginary city or swell the sullen rancor of the poor. Meanwhile, the rhetoricians of the poor, in campus pockets rummaging for change, inscribe the true authoritative city and mint sterling mementos of the people, studies wherein the mind serenely towers over safe specimens tacked up under glass. So let's raise a glass to the dizzy city, a toast to towers and all red-faced people, and drink for a change among the homespun poor. Okay. I'm going to read another kind of a formal poem. This is a ballade made famous by Francois Villon about 1,000 years ago. You've probably all heard of the ballad that ends with the lines, Mais où sont les neiges d'antan? That's a ballade. Where are the snows of yesteryear, especially today? Okay, this is Ballade Industrielle. Now that the world is one great marketplace, and all its treasuries, from sand and tar to elephant and diamond, outer space to ocean floor, herbs to jungle, are for sale, now party is turned commissar, and Russia, China, even Cuba climb that pyramid from serf to millionaire. Oh, now is the time. Oh, now is the precious time. Now that computers prowl at cheetah pace, combing the earth for cheapest laborer, and every digit in the human race must scrabble for superfluous welfare, and bide no time by coffee spoon or star, no time to dawdle, fiddle with a rhyme. You've got to get those groceries in the car. Now is the time. Oh, now is the precious time. When hoary banks account your state of grace, and future hands are cloning in a jar, and skillful engineers can scan your face, and clever churls can turn you into char, while mafiosi split their Vanderjar between Manhattan and some sunburnt clime, one mourning dove still murmurs from afar, now is the time, oh, now is the precious time. A lame albino gypsy cried, I lost my dear sweet darling's ring, I'm liable for this crime. Lord, if there's justice in this world, draw near. Now is the time, oh, now is the precious time. Okay, I'm going to read one more of this type of poem. This is another in a certain form. It's a Russian ode. A Russian ode had a certain form, and it had 9 stanzas of 8 lines each, just to warn you. It's a fairly long poem. And it's in 9 parts, so there were 3, it's divided into 3 parts. It goes back to the ancient Greek ode, so there's a thesis, an antithesis, and a resolution, whatever the word is for the 3rd. It's like a dialectic thing. Anyway, it's called One Evening Early Spring. Late afternoon, I walk down Morris Avenue. A blustery March wind hurries the clouds along below a slate blue sky. The dome comes into view. It sits atop a sturdy synagogue 6 sides strong. Just then, suddenly, the sun breaks through. The dome's half-sphere glows. Warm, ruby golden, radiant, expanding bubble, vital, alien, floats there, whispering, I will overturn you. What if a comet tore through the atmosphere today, smashed into Earth, a heavy sledgehammer with one blow blotting out all, all we have here, life, the human race, everything gone forever. This poem among the first to go into nothingness, along with all other poems, all songs, all works of art, everything built, bridges, those silos on red alert, all cities, houses, races, histories, all drop to dust. And suddenly national destinies come to an end, and rivalries between peoples, states, companies, authors, and the agony of becoming great, powerful, rich, grand, and the monotonous jockeying to get the better of others, and all the wayward labyrinths of love and desire, all broken hearts, all longings and disappointments, all the ideals of the whole earth, all hopes and sentiments, all dramas, cries for justice, all this, no more. But ghosts will remain. A ghost still walks. A faint, unseen, unrecognized spirit flits by ruins, a pile of radioactive rocks, of the synagogue, and enters it. Now the unseen has become invisible. Shadow, the shadow of a shadowy reflection. Walk through yourself, I hear a voice beckon. A seashore voice, papyrus sighs, waves nibble. By the seashore, where the immense waves address their manuscripts to the infinite sand, and roll and scroll, thundering over the hives of monastic hermit crabs, fiddling the undetermined panoply of Aphrodite, genetrix of these curving clusters of honeyed birth, droning into mindless cosmic sleep beneath an anonymous caress, and far off into air, dolphins, shuddering, dance, arcing. I have walked sighing through myself to the end, through the earth, to the end of the earth, to the end of myself, to the end of the end. The lost world, broken vows, all become earth at the end. The heavy stone flung from the sky cracks against a larger stone, both broken. You see the interstices increasing, creasing again, dividing, dividing again. One stone, a dying galaxy. Around the synagogue in the evening light, the houses cluster in their modest drab integrity, walking through their vocations under blight of a voracious contracting whirlpool city. The humble continue gathering on holiday outside the bronze double doors of their temples. The writer, an unnoticed bystander, crumples a scrap of cross-hatched paper and throws it away. And the wind lifts a corner of the scribbled page, not yet finished with the end of the universe. Over the brilliant dome, a small cloud of rage disguises the sun, cries, "I will immerse in tears, I will burn with fire, I will erase," pretending once more deep within heaven, not only to destroy all creation and then again rebuild the whole cracked edifice, but to do all this in the manner of a scribe, with one hand at his aching brow and one eye peering at a moss-bound, moldy parchment. And, Lord, we have deserved your diatribe. The parched earth groans for a comet's finality. Your mortified heart stretches through space, and swelling spreads ubiquitous the fiery ointment of your love, of your forgiveness, of your peace. Okay. I think I have about 5 more minutes. Is that all right? Or am I running over? I've been working on this endless poem. It's 300 pages long. I just finished it. So I think I'll just read like maybe 2 parts of it, none of them as long as these poems I just read. I've been working on this poem for about 3 years, and it's I don't think reading a little excerpt will really capture it, but it's kind of a meditation which turns into a dream vision finally toward the end. It turns into kind of a narrative. And there's various figures in this dream. One of them is named Natasha. She's this sort of muse figure who rides a cloudmobile, and the poet sort of follows after Natasha. And I'm really alluding in this poem into Natasha, who was the subject of this poem on the other side of this, which is a Mandelstam poem, which I think is one of his most beautiful poems. I mean, even in translation, I think you can see how moving this poem is, which I'm not going to read, but he really captures different layers of emotion, but you get a sense that he's also talking about Mary Magdalene going to the tomb at Easter, as well as realizing Mandelstam was in exile and he was about to go to the labor camps when he wrote this poem. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. So if you ever read my epic poem, that's the Natasha I'm sort of alluding to. So I'll just read one page from this epic poem. It's called Lanthanum, which is a Greek word. It's one of the atomic elements. It's element number 57 in the atomic table. Lanthanum means secret or hidden, and it's a rare earth, but it's actually not rare at all. It's in all kinds of things, and it's being used now as one of its uses is it's being put into new road pavements, and the lanthanum clears the atmosphere. So it takes particulates out of the air. So you're creating a road which is actually cleaning up smog, which is an interesting thing, I think, anyway. So it's element number 57, and I structured this entire humongous 300-page poem around the number 57 for various reasons, but I'm just going to read a local section of it called, it's number 22. It's the second to the last poem in the book, and it's got a title, Evening Land. One more digression. Evening Land is a quote from Mark Twain in Life on the Mississippi. He's going up the riverboat up the Mississippi, and someone's talking to him, and he's saying, this is the true sunset land, because he's going through this beautiful landscape in the middle of the country. Anyway, it's called Evening Land. We drove to the curl of Sakonnet Point at the southeast corner of Rhode Island, snuck past the private property and the keep-out signs, onto its pebbly spiral jetty, and watched the sun set somehow into the Atlantic. Late early summer evening, the sun only an eye, veiled in lambent mist, 57 fine shades of violet, most luminous sky ever screened by a retina. And I saw one kind round rose iris in Clearstory, Lanthanum Air Cathedral, through the vault of steel in heart of the earth, or simply the heart itself, where 144 lines meet, ply, panoply, an elemental number, all complete now, fin. For love is Lake Victoria of poem and universe, the shared factor, O union verse, both yin and yang, a given receptive openness, infinite and fold unfurled banner of joy, freedom. Love is egalitarian and kind. It will not break the weakest willow branch of orphan, poor man, widow. It will endure with them for righteousness and justice. And when the scales fall from our eyes at last, we'll behold scales held in your palm of matrix lines, lifelines, a Romany Rimmen harmony, Maggie, 28 pines all swimming into view, and one eye in hand prevails. And the shadow of your hand on my brow, in the starlight of cosmos over chaos, Olive Mountain. Your paddle whirling SOS. Oh, sip and see. Jael, Jesse O.L., Little Song Tree. Thank you. Now my old friend Stuart's going to read. I'd like to thank him for inviting me to this today.
Thank you, Bob, for setting this up, and pleasure to read with somebody whose work I care about. Fellow celebrants and workers in this vineyard for quite a while now. Whatever hinge poetry comes from, someplace between books and life. I mean, I think it's always elegy weather. And my day is taking me from a funeral memorial service to here. And there's a good friend that I knew over the years. One little story is just an affirmation of elegance. She was always dressed to the nines, would go out to clubs to hear jazz. And I've only known her in that capacity, someone who cared about music, listening to jazz. So she was taking intravenous chemo, and she had it well hidden in her pocketbook. She'd be drinking a martini very elegantly. Sometimes she'd flash me her pouch to say, "Yeah, I've got it again." So she did this for about 20 years. Long, good ride. And she's at peace right now. I'm blessed with a couple of books this year that are here in the store to be browsed or bought. May read a little bit from each, but I have some new poems I want to read from as well. And Henry and I were good friends of a lovely and complicated man who started the creative writing program here at Brown, Edwin Honig. Very special writer, critic, poet, translator. I've got a very short little poem here. For him that I wrote in his house. It's called A Last Poem for Edwin. See him not there, the man in the green chair, now air, hidden everywhere. Henry helped edit a very beautiful book, a tribute to him, called A Glass of Green Tea with Honey, which is worth a look if you haven't seen this book. This is a poem I wrote in my house in Adamsville. I was very lucky to meet someone who became my second mom at the Athenaeum and took care of her for a long time. And she died under my care at age 94 and left me her house. So this wandering Jew has a very beautiful old farm to take care of and learn about maintenance and things like that. This is called Intruder, Adamsville in winter. Storm after storm flattens fields, makes igloos from stone, wields a blade of air that cuts through clothes. A shiver sends its lightning across your interior sky. Deep snow unties the knots, lets trees fall. A bundled walk gets you lost almost, landmarks camouflaged but not to your advantage. Thoughts are stars and this one's closest. Listening to music in the warmth of a city apartment, an earful of blur, then something like myopia. This country house is an island amidst a frozen lake, where tracks from animals never seen lead to your front door as though they lived there, and you are the stranger. This is a poem I just wrote last week. I haven't written for a while, but my first beach walk, long beach walk, Horseneck, all the way down past the Novel and back. Simply called Horseneck. Blue wash prints sky onto beach. Old news made new again. Tide a kind of breath delivered, withheld, freed only to be caught by these bellows that flare the unseen into visibility. Tangled sea hair doodles in the undertow, recollects his freshly darkened ink spot. That wave, receding, lets us walk on water for the briefest instant. Party-colored sandglass, a window caulked into place by looking through it, where down is up, dry means wet, as a bird shatters the pane, flying off with a living crab in its jaws. A new edition glazes surface onto surf before we know it, while reading continues uninterrupted. Something Henry said about that element, lanthanum, is that the pronunciation?
Lanthanum.
Yeah, lanthanum. I love the idea that it's in the road and it clears the atmosphere. That's very cool. It reminds me of a great line of Antonio Machado, "The traveler is the son of the road." And I love the idea, even in Rhode Island, we can travel quite a lot without changing scale. You know, it's like going to Boston's an hour away, but within this small state, from Greene with those cranberry bogs, it's like Rhode Island's Kentucky, to Little Compton, it's quite a world to cover. And there's a lot of little worlds whirling around here. It's a pleasure to cross them, think about them right from those places. Reminds me of the Arts Council had a program we could dial a poem 20-some years ago. And for some reason they allowed this to be on that road sign poem. And it's a collage of road signs, not just in Rhode Island, but driving north on 95. So it's your highway taxes at play. Yield, stop. Soft shoulders, falling rocks, slippery when wet. Hidden drives, entering Sharon. Merge, entering Lynn. It's a chauvinist poem, but it's true. They're all road signs. This is my first posthumous poem. I wrote it witnessing a bar fight last summer. And I was sitting there before I get up, and I'm looking at the peripheral vision of the signs here for the books, self-development and mystery. And I think that's quite pertinent. And it certainly enters into why I'm here and how I'm here. Yeah, I wasn't part of this bar fight. In fact, I deflected it, and some billable hours were gone through there. And the guy who wanted to engage me in a fight ended up buying me a drink, maybe a hug. And it was kind of beautiful how that all ended. But it was a summer of, I think, 3 fights. So I wrote this in my quiet house called For My Brothers. And there's a famous print that maybe you've seen of dogs cheating at cards. There's under the leg, yeah, passing the card. So I wanted to understand a little backstory about that, and I looked it up. And it's called A Friend in Need, and it's by Cassius Coolidge, an American cartoonist, 1844 to 1934. And For My Brothers, that image is helpful to have as a shadow. And the citations from Leonard Cohen, wonderful line from the song, "I ache in the places where I used to play." I was Diamond Jack, all bluster and attack. My aunt, that ice queen cunt, melted me young, chose my age of consent. We never cared where we went, so long as we got there fast, had mad fun. Let it be said he enjoyed the ride, flashed gold, died well spent. No one cried. I was Jack of Spades, fils papa, our father who art in Hades. Black but comely, part woman, I changed sex like a chameleon. Not only tables but tricks were turned, Jack or Jacqueline, those rough or silken trades. More than candle ends were burned. The high life on the down low, roiled flush beats off a full house, as plumbers say. This is how my game was played. Life's long, death's short, stay up late, drink your fill, get laid. I was Jack of Hearts, the dauphin of false starts, entitled, undone, my kingdom for 2 farts. Lust steamed me, a lobster in a shell. I was a lover who gambled flesh, wet dreams ago, I'm glad it's over. I, club-footed Jack, your not quite Byronic hack, who limps and scrapes through timeless space with his stone cape across his back. I lived in clover until down on my luck doubled me over. No longer Jack of clubs, I'm now the patron saint of pubs, and protect happy chaos by drowning my sons like pups in beer, so they live eternally here, not after. God bless their drunken tears. I hear them echoing as laughter. That kind of segues into a sign that I saw in a bar in Portugal that I wanted to have as part of this book called Aquaferma, which is a love song to the Azores. I was lucky enough to live for 5 years or so. And it's a sign in an old little dive bar. It said, "We are closed Sundays in order to give the livers of our esteemed clients a chance to recover." Which is as good a reason as any for a bar to be closed. And my friend Onesimo Almeida, we had a department here, Portuguese Studies. It's a wonderful lifeline for me. We used to correspond when I was there, and he publishes some writing I've done about the islands in the Gavia Brown, which is published in English and Portuguese every year the last few years. And this book is in English, but it's salted with Portuguese. Let's see. This poem is called July Café Central. 4 girls eat ice cream, giggling, 3 with blue hair, identical specs, ankles thick with age, school kids, suddenly ancestors. Next time I turn around, they're air, gone grandmothers, women of substance, melted. It was quite literally a pleasure to see these old ladies eating ice cream and they're turning around. The place is full of these public plazas. There was a wonderful poem, a poet I became friendly with, who didn't speak English, and I barely exchanged some words with him, but we became friends at kind of a non-verbal level, muttered a little French at each other. But he was a Portuguese man who died suddenly in his 50s, heart attack on the street. And he's regarded as one of the good poets in Portugal in the 20th century. His name is Rui Rodrigues, and he was a journalist by profession, but wrote a couple of books, so we exchanged books. And we had a memorial for him at our restaurant there. And this is called Some Words for Rui. Talk's not cheap, but can be cheapened. A poet surprised by a sudden death performs the pianist's resigned shock as his heart skyjacked through palms and fists. Anyway, a presence has left its presence gone among us, while that listening mouth is elsewhere. Flash from shared ground to grieving field, each friend a finger on a severed hand, negative numbers all looking to 0 like a sun. Rui, the Carlsberg's fresh. To unring this memorial bell isn't possible. Thanks for your book, which I'm starting to decode. Wish me luck in not losing sight, sound, sense of your example. That life's not cheap, though often cheapened. The trick being, you made it look so easy in life and death, not to fill it with emptiness. It's the first poem I wrote, the only poem I wrote in Portuguese, actually. The daily journal there had the weather reports. It pictured all the 9 islands, and each one has its own weather. So it's called Tempo Avariado, and it means broken weather. So I used the language of the weather report. Moments when the head is quite fogged. The heart opens later on. Moderate nostalgia. Memories crest, then break. Today we have monotony changing into predicted mood weather. Congratulations. That word is a translation of parabéns, which is a Portuguese word for congratulations. But if you spell it a little differently, it means congratulations. I was in this little magical island, kind of Atlantic Polynesia, when Bush, Blair, and Aznar met to speak about the Gulf War in America's military base at Lodge. And I was watching it on CNN. It was maybe 5 miles away from where I was living, but it was completely isolated, protected, and it was a trip to watch it on TV when it was happening pretty much down the street. So this is called Barnacle Bill Pounds Sand. Disarm Saddam, keep us from harm, the UN is a traitor. Depose Hussein from evil's reign, cries Warden Bush, the jailer. Change regime to American dream, Willie Loman was no failure. Bomb Iraq and don't look back, rips Emperor Bush, the tailor. Bomb Iraq and then Chirac with help from Mr. Blair. The Allies ride with God on their side, led by their Texas Ranger. The son of a Bush rules by putsch, and Washington is no manger. A couple of poems for my daughter. She's 11 now. She's visiting. Her mom met the proverbially rich guy. They sailed from the islands to Denmark, where she's now living. I wrote this for her. It's called No Girl is an Island. It's for Sophia now and later. Your scant English told me recently, I have 5 years, I am a flower. As Mama says, not only, but 2. Each day's moods feature tiger, howling monkey, star fallen asleep mid-flight. Ways you sing, move, tease, resist, give in. Spotlight the femme fatale abloom within ripening seed. Papito's little goose giving rainbowed creation a lesson in chameleon charm. Houses here are aquariums, and for a short while you're still a freshwater fish. Self-contained lake of a thing, swimming through itself to the nearby sea, which each summer awaits your arrival as mermaid, salty with elsewheres, marine life, tides, shipwrecks, tomorrow's drowned sailors. She just taught me the difference between a friend and a boyfriend. She says, the boyfriend is the one that you kiss. Okay. And the word in Portuguese for father is pai. And in our restaurant there, she used to call me papito. No one ever heard that word before. And when she was about 3, she started doing that. Papito, she still calls me that. And if you ever get a tattoo, it will say papito. And people ask her, why? What's up with this? She made that word because, and this is the gift of the poet having a daughter like this. She said, Sofia, tres, papito, tres, igual. She wanted the syllables to be equal. So I thought, God bless her, that's good antenna, I felt very lucky. This book was a gift this last year published by RISD, Department of Architecture. I've been lucky enough to do, on the basis of a drunken dinner, I've been doing crits there for about 25 years in architecture. They are sort of blessed in their openness. They have people from outside the discipline, painters, musicians, sculptors, and I'm able to do a kind of thinking out loud language as design. So they welcome, talk about metaphor, talk about improvisation, and how this connects with building. Because architecture is not only about what we see as building, but concepts of joinery, what goes with what, hinges, material reasoning, inside, outside. And poems, I think, are a bridge toward that. I fell in love with a very beautiful picture by Bruce Chow, who teaches in the glass department there. And I feel really lucky to have this as the cover of the book. If you look at it close, it's a tree with a white branch. And that white branch is a plastic PCB pipe. So the pipe is attached to the tree and functions as a perfect way, I think, to talk about artifice, in the garden. So this is kind of a selected poem back from the 1980s until this year. Given that we're all sort of occasionally reading the newspapers, whether we really take it on as a daily task or not, listening to CNN, being aware of what goes on. This film, There Will Be Blood, anybody see this film a while back by the oil industry? Daniel Day-Lewis? Hey, okay. I couldn't help but write about that. This is called Salvation Incorporated. And these lines, Eloi, Eloi, lima sabachthani, on the cross. Okay, I riff on this in the course of the poem. If Jesus comes back and offers us the same deal, even volunteering to do himself in, making those famous holes by his own torture, imagine his then our surprise when instead of blood he gushes oil, a human derrick, this time flat against the ground so a whole superstructure can be built around him, a one-man church with its crude spire between thieves with legal representation. When did the corporation become corporeal, the body corporate, gifted with the privilege of sentience? Its robot status has surpassed that of its creators, who at least have had the decency to die. Eternal life, solvency, amen. This corpus callosum, callous body, tries to hide the evidence buried in plain sight, corpus delicti, body of the crime. Hired omniscience narrates multinational deception, lip service prayed to the empathetic fallacy, chief deity in charge of crediting animate beings with human feelings. In the Amico language, Esso, Exxon, Gulf Mobile, Heschel, Getty, my God, why hast thou foreclosed on me? Is transubstantiation now our neo-geo-theo world order? What's the spin on Spinoza, who saw one soul and infinite substance, of which extension and thought are attributes, and individual beings are changing forms? The Gospel of St. Mark's reveals a protean work ethic, truly Catholic, where communion extends beyond symbolism to actual fuel. That body is the means of production in our hands, its receivers. What's indigenous if not this? Blood thickened past heavy water, uniting us as the original nuclear family. Nucleus being Latin for kernel, inner part, diminutive of nux nusus, nut, crazy love. Here's a poem called Thanksgiving. A song wants a mouth wants an ear. The mind wears an eye on each finger. Not only the stomach feels hunger. The heart is a hunter-gatherer, which will later, if lucky, plant, then harvest. Meanwhile, a mouth wants a myth, a voice to tell it with. The past is a dead star that shines on everything, and this mouth wants to sing. This is called Rattle and Roll. I drove all night to get to you. Roy Orbison's skyscraper voice, heat shimmers its way from cellar to tower. Throaty and high, his words stay in air after they've made sense. Those diner and motel signs flicker and shine with his bright neon shiver. A truck just whooshed by whose tires were drums. The wind howled as it sped off to carry on the song. A stave of birds, living woodwinds, plays a score set into rows of telephone wire like so many printed notes. Transposed now, maybe the hum of all that talk made them conduits. Conduit? Conduit? Restless, then settling into themselves by singing. I was dreaming while I drove that long straight road ahead. Even if one of us is dead, the other keeping time the only way he can, letting the rhythms do their dance. This is a homage to the four directions. One of my eyes is a Jew, one Christian. My tongue a heretic, burning with words. One ear Buddhist, the other Muslim. In between, music played by no one. Sleeping alone is impossible. Bed is a guillotine, a dream beheaded by a dream. This is my impuritan work ethic. Day jobs, nights free, the floating in between and earned invisibility, stopping off to vanish inside a drink or else a lake's beckoning blue. Necessities make their music by making me listen, breathing in all this yellow air, having only gray dust to show for it. My riches are dandelions blown note by note, disappearing all over the grass. And maybe if I finish with that, the audience can heckle Henry and I and engage us in some kind of back and forth, which would be nice for a minute or two. Otherwise, we'll threaten to read maybe another poem each. Well, ask away. Anybody have burning comments, questions, threats?
How come you brought up that movie though? Well, that was a pretty graphic movie that came in on that. There Will Be Blood.
Yeah, I just cited it because it didn't necessarily give me the idea for the poem, but it certainly backed it up. The whole thing that's been in the news about the corporation, like Romney's line about, they're people too, right? So I wanted to reference that. That's pretty much a parallel text of what I was working at,
It literally is a bloodbath, corporate America.
For sure. And I guess one of the ways that poets can sort of learn to swim in the blood is just by jumping in, not to stand outside of it. Okay, you learn swimming in the water. So the same thing in the bloodbath is to just engage it. Which some of these poems are political, some are not, but by paying attention, it's a way of enlarging the conversation.
Cool.
That's why when I used to live in France, I used to really like watching Le Pen on TV. And my French friends were really pissed off at me, like, how can you do this, And I wanted to generate my own antibody. I wanted to make a kind of vaccine. Because I found him very charismatic, and certainly not all true, but some half-truths, some quarter-truths, and much more dangerous to ignore than to listen to. So I remember George Wallace, Curtis LeMay, all these guys. I wanted to, let's hear the speech, let's hear the words. And maybe I can, do something about it in a way of letting people listen anew to that,
Like
right?
that fist fight you had when you get engaged.
Yeah. Because unless a poem is a living thing, what is it? I love to just joke, to riff, but we have a great opportunity to happen back to the world, right? Whether it's like this, or whether it's writing, or just one-to-one. But language is so easily manipulated. It's our job, I think, to take it on and to play with it. Otherwise, we're just slaves of corporate America, like you're saying. And there's ways to do that and get by and live a life, but to greater or lesser extent, Quiet desperation, it was said. If I didn't have an inner life, I'd be in deep shit. I'm still in deep shit, but at least I have something inside that I can work with. And, I don't measure what I'm doing by the jingle in my pockets. It's definitely useful to have some flow money, but flow language, flow words, flow, just to be able to investigate flow, I think that's what an artist is doing, and it's worth something.
Speaking of France, we talk about family values in this country, and if we value the family, why don't we give paid vacation days like Europe, or you know what I mean? Say it's family values, but
Well, that's infrastructure. That's a whole economy. That's a whole other conversation, really. And none of us know the answer to that. But you remind me of, it's a question about organic form, really. If I can transpose it to a poetry talk, in the sense, each poem is its own. Each occasion is its own. We have to meet its demands. We have to respond. So in a struggle with America and a struggle with ourselves, there's a poet, Robert Duncan, and he took the word responsibility and cut it in half. He said responsibility is the ability to respond. So I think that is a beautiful way of shining a light on the struggle right there. It's as individuals to empower ourselves to respond and be selective. Something you don't have to respond to. You just walk away. It's not my fight. I was very impressed. My daughter said this the other night. She was talking about her mom and the brother are fighting and there's difficulties, and doesn't even have to do something to call her brother here in Fall River. But Sophia said, it's not my fight. She's 11 and she knows enough to say it's not my fight. And I think that's really interesting, because when you can back up. And as artists, as thinking beings, whether we write or not, we can all be selective and realize we can hone things to our advantage, like studying martial arts. Take back the night for the ladies, take back the day for the men too. We have to just be aware of what's going on and be able to not just to respond for attack from here, but from here. All that.
You and Henry are local poets, and you're obviously people that write for listeners. One thing that I've been discouraged about in picking up a lot of modern poets and trying to read them is that they don't seem to be writing for any audience except one that appreciates perhaps abstract wordplay, what have you. I miss that about poets, that just to pick up something and have something resonate with you instead of confusion.
What do you think, Mr. Gould?
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like poetry is, like Stuart was getting at, it's kind of a mystery of engagement. I mean, if the poet is just going through the motions or playing out a puzzle for themselves, then it's not going to be interesting to anybody else. Usually it's a problem somewhere in the poet's consciousness or subconsciousness that brings out the writing. And if other people can't grasp what they're wrestling with, then they'll get engaged with it too. I think that's part of what we're up to anyway.
And it's interesting too, personal preferences, like Henry mentioned Ted Berrigan before. Okay, and it's just, I hate Ted Berrigan. And I'm not ashamed to say it, he's a local poet, okay? I don't like everything about myself, God knows, but Ted Berrigan's poetry is one of these people that, so many name dropping. I'm sure there's good things about it that I don't get, and I tried reading the whole collected book recently, like 500-600 pages, sat with it. So much of that's just not poetry to me. I just can't
I'm
wrap my
not
head
sure I
around
could
it.
read it now either, but when I did read it, we're talking about the late 60s.
Yeah,
What really grabbed me was the informality.
yeah,
And
sure.
the way he was engaging people too, because
In its time, yeah.
he was making it kind of a game with the audience and really.
Yeah. And when I say I hate, of course, that's reactive and that's strong. There are moments, connection, sure. He wrote a beautiful line about when someone dies, your heart stops and starts again. I mean, he had some grace in his work, but a fat 90% is to me offensive and not music. You know. But thank God we all have
That
our.
wasn't from a rattle. That was when he went to New York and picked up.
Okay.
That's why they call him a New York.
A New York poet, yeah, New York School of Poetry. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, not at all. No. I just want to interject that since you cited him. I just thought.
Well, you know, I had a conversation with a young man recently about Lawrence Ferlinghetti, and I've kind of looked at him in the same way. Like, you know, yeah, it's kind of fun. You get some of it, but it just seems to be of another era. And not-
Well, it's for sure of another era, but so is Bob Dylan, a lot of people think, even though he's still making music. I mean, Ferlinghetti I think he's paid some serious dues, and I respect his work. I think he's like the difference between a beatnik and a hippie, you know, I mean, in the sense that the beatnik had a sense of history.
Yeah.
A hippie could just be someone with long hair.
Yeah.
And it's not, Ferlinghetti went to the Sorbonne and he studied. He knew different art, you know, he was aware of many, many fields. And I think he writes a very hip, sort of jazz-influenced American English, you know. But like another era, but is that validity? Again, this whole thing about relevance is the way the economy commodifies things. What's happening in music is everything's doing now. And I'm all for another era, to be, again, selective about it. I have to keep reframing things, being, you know, picky about where I'm taking things from and how I can spin it into what I'm doing, right? Just because it's old doesn't mean it ain't good. And by the same token, just because it's old doesn't mean it is good, right? I used to buy and sell antiques, so I'm aware of that romance about old things. You know, I'm becoming an old thing myself. You know, it's not, you know, aging is a mixed blessing. I ache in the places where I used to play, Mr. Cohen. Hasn't. What else can we share from you guys?
Anybody want to hear one more poem? Not
Yes.
for me, no. Bruce. I went over my schedule.
You did, well. I used to have poems in different notebooks, and notebooks would be labeled. So when I do reading, I would take requests, like there'd be shout-outs. There'd be poems about like love poems, Iraq poems, hunger poems. You know. So what kind of poem would you like? See if I can oblige you. By subject matter, by eras, by
Grandmother poem.
Listen to that. That gentleman is going to get a grandmother poem. The good thing about a book is there's a table of contents. It's one of the happy things. And I do have a grandmother poem. I just want to beg your forgiveness of finding it. While I'm looking for it, somebody say something intelligent. I don't remember what it's called. That would help me as I'm looking it up.
Talk about the lack of music between like the different Muslims and the Jews.
Yeah.
There wasn't any. Is that our culture? You said there's so many different angles
Yeah.
coming at you. There's no harmony oftentimes between the. We're like tribal. I feel like our society is like tribal. People stay in their groups. Not that they're barbaric, but they're tribal. They keep in their.
That's interesting. I guess as a comment on that, I could read this poem, because my grandmother poem kind of speaks to that. The title is just simply the places that she lived. Other poems speak to this too, in the sense of growing up in the 50s. My grandmother was born in Russia, so she was officially like an enemy of American culture. And I didn't feel like an enemy. I love America, but having lived in Europe, I also love Europe. And I feel very grateful for Russian literature, music, right? Other reference points. This is Odessa, New York City, Fall River, Newport, Miami, Warwick. And so she died in the room I was born. And the first line comes from something she said to me when I had my first job as a tutor in France. Why go to Europe? We escaped from there. Her flame flickers, mine appears. That loved mouth, dead, makes an oracle of air. Desperanto, a language of despair. Yiddish echoes are close enough to hear. Why go to Europe? We escaped from there. Darkened yellow stars still flare, radiate as lived idea. Loved mouths, dead, make oracles of air. Hogan's Heroes isn't funny, Sonny. Her vanished world exists as present fear. Why go to Europe? We escaped from there. This non-believer attempts a prayer to God's missing ear. Love mouths dead air. Diaspora is elsewhere. Home is here. Why go to Europe? We escaped from there. Dead mouths, loved, make oracles of air. Thanks for asking for that poem.
Well, it's a righteous poem. And it's a continuation of some kind of holy conversation. And I think that what's happening now is that there's like a 1958 convergence. It's happening again. The last time I felt this way was 1958. And it's coming back because the Four Horsemen are just outside the field of vision. But you know one of them is going to strike. And so we need the ancients. We need the ancient voices. I was just looking at your corona of hair. You're very fortunate to have it. You know, it really goes back. You know, your bloodlines go way back. And it's a beautiful poem about your grandmother. Yeah,
All
we
our
need to have
bloodlines
you
go way
around.
back, you know, and just to say all of our bloodlines go way back. If you think about it, like we're all trees and our roots are just so deep, right?
Yeah.
We're walking with them, but if you think about it, that incredible rush, almost getting vertigo, to think about our great-grandparents and behind and behind and behind and behind. We all bring such a depth. It's how we catalyze it into our daily lives, how we use that. How available are we to that? We all have such rich lives. Like Henry's much more generous than I am saying we're all poets. I don't necessarily believe that. We're all potentially receptive to moments of engagement, to art.
Well, I have a,
Yeah.
could I read a very short
Absolutely.
grandmother poem? I'll just read it
Yeah.
again. This is not my grandmother, but came from, I was walking up in the Summit neighborhood near Miriam Hospital,
Yeah.
and I saw what I described in the poem. It's called April. Sunday afternoon in the gray rain, I see a shriveled old woman hunched under a black umbrella, held tight like a turtle shell. Slowly she makes her way, with each step her body lurching sideways. And she's singing, her clear voice dancing before her.
Cool.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
So
Music.
Good. No, just to say that there's an invitation that we can all maybe walk away and respond to, just to pay attention. Like that's, I think, the gift that we all have, and poems can help with that. You know, it's a kind of,
That was a poem to show that we're all poets. You see, this,
Well-
just this lady walking down the street. Just
well, not all poets. No, I think the idea of attention, that we all have attention, and attention, like respect, must be paid. And the more attention that we pay, the more rewarded we are. You know, the more, I think, enriched our lives become, no matter what's happening politically, no matter what the mess is. I think our lives can be incredibly deepened. And we are these old trees, you know, walking with our roots, and it doesn't have to be cumbersome. Like one of the Eastern wisdom lines has it: when you're on a train, you have to carry your bags. You know, you can go with some kind of flow, and then let your bags rest, right?
What I was getting at, and what you're getting
Yeah.
at really too, is that by saying we're all poets, is that the only reason people pay any attention to poets is because they listen to words and what they mean the same way poets do, and they're listening to that, and poets are listening. That's why I threw that in there.
Yeah,
I mean, I think you're right that it's a special activity, and it takes a lot of special dedication and commitment and talent, obviously. But the root of it is shared by everybody, and that's why we have poets. it's something everybody understands at some level.
Yeah, we all have a consciousness, and activated to a greater or lesser extent. And the word poetry, poesis, the Greek word making, so it's all what we make. So we all make our lives. Some of them are more verbal than others, some of them are more informed than others. Some people hate poetry, some people hate art. God bless them. That's
They're the
okay.
greatest poets out there.
Yeah, maybe so, maybe so. Just to share one little riff before we leave, which is not a poem. I've never written this. I thought about writing it. I never have. It's one of my favorite images I carry around with me. And I see it as a film in my head. I was at Venda Ravioli a couple of years ago, and I'm sitting there having some lunch, watching a very anemic, white-faced old lady bent over the meat counter, looking as if she wants to buy her innards. I mean, it was a transference. It was this incredibly red meats, and this pale, pale old woman is bent over it. And I just thought that's an incredible meeting. And if I was a photographer, I would have just snapped it and tried to present it in the round. It was just such a human moment. It was just an extraordinary gift. And those kind of things can be written. I like to share them, just to think out loud, talk about it. But we all have that. We all see, as we're walking around, the stopwatch clicks. There's a moment. Whether it's talked about, written about, we all witness it. And that's what the joy is witnessing. And maybe on that level, we're all poets. Just witnessing. What we do with it is another question. Yeah. Thank you. I could hear you listening all afternoon. It's been very gracious, and it's nice to be part of this. Thank you.